did do some research, like my late sister Blossom, who remembered the grandparents that I never met. She knew them. And so she was able to tell me about Harry's mother and father and what the apartment looked like and stuff like that. And also, of course, Selma is her mother. And so she was able to tell me about Selma, along with I have nieces and nephews who are almost my age, who are their children, and they, of course, knew Selma. But I was dealing with a Selma that they didn't know, which was young Selma. And that was Blossom, who was able to connect me with her, who knew her when she was a teenager, and then, so it was close enough. Otherwise, it was essentially myself dealing with my own memory and going from there, taking it step by step. And then 500 rewrites later, as I went. Everyone thinks it was, including my wife, thinks it was just dashed off. Literally 500 rewrites, page by page, as I went. And it looks like a first draft in the writing because I remembered all the transitions as I went, and it just sort of just happened, which is, I guess, the way I write, because the second screenplay I did after that kind of went the same way, and that was pure fiction, based on an award-winning short story I had done years before. And it's a long-winded answer to the fact that it was, and that was actually my father, not my grandfather. I'm the youngest kid, and the only one left, so to speak. So
that was your father?
That's my father, yeah.
Why Big Rock Candy Mountain? Was that a toss-up name? Was that the name that came?
He kept singing it. It was a one-tune. He had a deaf ear when it came to music, and he just would sing that song. I didn't know until years later that a wonderful writer wrote a novel called The Big Rock Candy Mountain. I'm trying to get his name flew out of my head. It's not William Stafford. It was
Wallace Stegner.
Wallace Stegner. Thank you. But it wasn't based on Wallace Stegner's book, so it was okay. DreamWorks, Spielberg, who almost bought this a couple of weeks ago, pointed out that it's okay, it's based on the song. So, and that's in the public domain. The script almost was sold a few weeks ago to DreamWorks. They are were owned by Paramount, and they just bought themselves out of Paramount with Indian money, of all things. And they're from India.
Right.
And there's a woman named Stacy Snyder, who is his partner and boss, so to speak. She runs DreamWorks. And she really liked it. But they're doing what they call 2 historical biopics. Now there's Hollywood talk for you. And this fell in that category. But they did say that I should not hesitate to send anything and everything I've got to them from this point on.
Awesome.
So that's a big step in the right direction. But the film still remains unmade. So if anybody wants to make it, it's yours.
All right.
What happened to Marie?
Marie lived to be 93 years of age and ended up living with me and then and my wife, and then she went into the Jewish Home and Hospital for the Aged, where she lived a couple of years and then died what they call the old folks' good death. She died of pneumonia, where essentially you fall asleep, painlessly, so to speak. And she lasted 93 years, and the best thing about her was, in her 93, just before she died, she was born in the Ukraine. And I told her, Mom, the Ukraine is now a real country again.
Oh, wow.
And she looked at me and she said, who the hell cares? So that was her parting shot. She was actually one of the funniest human beings that ever lived. She would do things like we would be driving down in Chicago, Lakeshore Drive, and they lit up the Wrigley building. And she said, you know how much it costs to light that building up? We said, no, Manya, how much? She said, plenty. But her best remark was my dad took her golfing. True story. and you hired a guy to stand behind her and swing. So she swings and misses, swings and misses, swings and misses, turns around and says, "This is a tough course." So when you're given stuff like that, you don't have to be a good writer, you just have to write it down.
So what?
Now the asthma's passing, I hate asthma. Don't smoke.
What was it like to let the characters sort of come to life on the page, even considering that they actually started out as real people in your life?
That's a very good question, because they are not real people once they hit the page. And for me, it was difficult because I was getting over I'm a film director and producer, and have made 100 films. But writing a screenplay was a whole other thing. I started as a writer, but it was never going to be screenplays. It was going to be short stories and novels and stuff like that. So this became something I didn't know I could do. And I just went into it, and then I learned something. A screenplay is closer to a novel than it is to a play. Don't think of a play when you're thinking of writing a screenplay. It's actors and it's theater, but it's a whole other kind of theater. It's like a novel, if it were alive. It's more of a, because of the time and shape of a screenplay. You can go back and forth in time like you can get in the character's mind in a novel. And so that's a mistake Hollywood keeps making. The good movies we see and recognize as really good movies are movies that if you turned it into a novel would work. And if you turn it into a play, it generally doesn't work. And the hardest thing is to make your dialogue track. I don't know how else to put it, flow easily. And that's something that Mr. Clopton has done beautifully well with his screenplay that I just finished reading. I mean, that you can't teach. It works or it doesn't work, and it can't be taught, I think. The worst day of my life was when I did a television series with James Michener, the writer. It was a series called James Michener's World. And I said, "Well, when am I getting my first script?" And he says, "I'm not writing it. They're not paying me to write it." So I had to sit down in my country house in Connecticut, and I sat with my little portable typewriter that put 2 kids through college, and I typed, "I'm James Michener," and then I froze. What have I got myself into? So imagine if I had to write to boots. I don't think I would have made it.
Was that one of your Emmys?
That was one of my Emmys.
Yeah, so you got over your fear.
I got over my fear because he wasn't 1/10 the writer that her husband. He's not a good writer. He's a good researcher.
You know, when you talked about your process and these 500 revisions, and that's, I think, the tough part, the revising and the polishing. And then when you're writing about real people that are close to you and dear to you, that you love and care about, which I think came across so beautifully in this screenplay.
Thank you.
And so my question is, how do you keep up that if it's confidence or that, I'm doing right by these people?
Well, you do and you don't. If somewhere along the line you think, "I've got it. If I can stick with it, I'll make it with this one." But until you hit that point, at least in my experience, you're totally in doubt. You're sailing blind, and there's no road map, and you can't Google it up and get 0.2 of a mile, make a left. So you just drive, and you can drive right off the cliff, and you don't know it, but then you know it. And most of the time it stops you. At least it stops you, and you know it stops you. And then suddenly it doesn't stop you. Suddenly, oh, wait a minute. If I just keep going this way, and this way and then it just starts to develop itself. And you have to trust those instincts. Otherwise you could never finish it. I mean, you really couldn't. Because it's the loneliest thing in the world. until you're no longer alone. And then they're all there with you. And you're not lonely at all. You got all these friends, and they're better than all of you put together because they don't talk back. But it's really a combination like that. You got to be a little nuts to go through it. I mean, it drives you a little nuts, but there's a wonderful sense of achievement that you have to struggle to, and then the rest is almost meaningless. It's that sense of achievement as you go, and you know you got it. That you can't top it.
So Al, how important was this whole thing today that
Very.
Mark put together?
Essential.
And the validation for you of this whole process?
Essential, because it made me feel viable. It worked. In fact, I was going to make all kinds of notes and I stopped. It worked. I could feel it tracking. And I knew that even though it's confusing when you read it or hear it, I know on screen that you can see it.
Yeah.
And so, and there are cards on screen. It says December 19th, et cetera. And I know it works. And that I had corroboration from Spielberg, where he said, the transitions work. And that's a very hard thing. I mean, not from him, but from his company.
And you'd have costume and you have the everything would be
Supporting.
Everything's supporting it, yeah. The trick is, though, even with that, you can get lost if you don't. I'm thinking of some movies where, what's that Humphrey Bogart film, where you're totally lost from beginning to end. Anyway, what surprised me today was that it felt like I was writing it. In other words, I could all the rewrites I could feel working for me, and only a couple of places like that. At one point I say puff. You never say puff, so that's out, bad, and things like that. You don't hear it until you hear it, so to speak. And the acting was really quite something. Some really great actors can't do this. Very hard to do as a cold reading. That doesn't mean they're bad actors. It's a certain kind of a talent.
I just want to know where the fish is, or was that a fish tail?
No, that's a real fish. I wish I knew where that fish
I've got a
was.
picture of it.
Oh, really? But you don't know where the actual fish went?
No, I
Oh,
don't.
wow.
No, wait, I do know. It got put outside on a fire escape years later, and it rained, and the fish became a minnow. It's a true story.
Right, there you go, went back to nature.
Went back to nature.
Great,
Yeah.
that makes me feel good.
And Al, I'm saying this not just for myself, but I'm saying it for Blossom, because she wanted this so badly. This your dad and her dad. This was, she talked about that all of her life. She talked about how important it was that something gets written about your dad. And she would wanted to be here, so I'm just saying thank you for her as well.
Oh, I'm glad to hear you say that.
Really
Thank
wonderful.
you.
Yeah.
There's a guy came into his office.
Right, it's a true story.
He said, I've got this cartoon, I want to take it out to California, and I think I can sell it to the movies. And he showed him a picture of a mouse, and my father said, what is this? He says, it's called Mickey Mouse. And he says, hey, get out of here. So he threw Walt Disney out of his office. And then there was the guy that came in with a bottle of fizzy stuff. He said, what are you going to call this? It's called Pepsi-Cola. I said, get that crap out of here. Who's going to drink that? So you win some, you lose some. But life goes on. A number of years ago, I made a film called Santiago's Ark, which is a pure fiction film about a Puerto Rican kid who builds a boat on the roof of his tenement in Spanish Harlem. And it won a lot of awards, and I produced, wrote, and directed it, and I'm very proud of it. But I needed a music score, and Michael knew these bluegrass kids, And he got these 4 kids, we took them up to my house in Connecticut, and they scored the film. And the daughter of one of those guys is sitting way back in the corner there, and his name is Scott Brownlee, and that's his daughter, and I think that's a coincidence.
All roads lead to Newburyport.
Yeah.
They really do. Well, Al, thank you so much for giving me the opportunity to do this and giving us all the opportunity to meet you and Al Sr. Since he was
Thank you.
quite a man, and we feel like we lived through the whole century with you and your family, and it was just really a wonderful honor and a great
Well, thank you all. The wonderful achievement was Marc Clopton and Leslie Novak. Leslie started it all, but Marc Clopton really did it. This is his theater group, and these people were wonderful, and he must be a very good director. So kudos to Marc Clopton of Newburyport, Massachusetts. Mwah, Mark, thank you.